Hello, everybody. Here with me today is Chris Riegel, well-known entrepreneur and the CEO of Stratacache. Chris, hi.
Good morning, sir.
It's been a long time since we've spoken. You have been so busy in the years that we've not spoken. Tell us a little bit about what you've been up to.
So I think in the last really 3 years, the pandemic years, we've spent a lot of time continuing to grow the business as well as build towards new opportunities with our reshoring of display industry in the US and building a micro LED facility in Eugene, Oregon, starting to bring that in. So we see tremendous growth in display, in sensor, in digital signage, and how this kind of next gen world is playing out, where tying knowledge of that customer to helping that customer be better serviced is super exciting world.
Absolutely. So when do you think you'll be building displays in Oregon?
So we have first articles coming off end of this year, first test units. So we've spent the better part of the last 2 years once having acquired the facility, bringing the facility up to speed. We're still receiving tools in for the facility, but making that a full operation.
Right. Well, that was obviously you're well known in the industry as being one of the cleverest people in the industry. I'm not blowing smoke up. You know what? Everybody knows that you're a super smart guy. You're years ahead of this with all the supply chain problems. Building displays in the US must be such a good idea.
It's one of those kind of humorous discussions where when you start to talk to people about saying, hey, I'm going to just build display in the US, they look at you like you have a horn coming out of your head like a unicorn. And then you start to think through, well, with micro LED and the technology shift that's happening there's a great opportunity because that entire supply chain is domestic and can be domestic long term. In the last 2 years, the Chinese have really come into the market extremely strong and are pushing the Koreans fully out of market. You see Samsung's market share in television in the US going from 24% to 4% last year. The Chinese are now just in full invasion mode relative to taking over that display industry globally. So with that, there's new opportunities, and micro LED is one of the biggest ones. Specifically, you saw last week, Apple made the announcement the new Apple Watch is using a micro LED display, and Apple's going to assemble that in the US as well. So we hope to be right alongside in that trend of saying, yes, you can make display in the US and can make some really brilliant product.
That's good. Our US viewers will be interested to know if you're getting any help from Washington on this. I guess that they must love what you're doing.
So, very specifically, part of our business model is leveraging CHIPS Act funding that was passed last year because displays are now semiconductors. And if you look at the arc of display, from a display perspective, you're going away from tech that's been very efficient and very scaled over the last 30 years, but now to direct emission display, that's a chip. So chips, there's less and less difference between a microchip and a display semiconductor chip these days. And it's also strategic from the US interest to say, whether I'm Apple, whether I'm Boeing or a defense contractor, it does not make sense to make displays for an F-35 fighter in China.
Absolutely. And so they were the acquisitions in Oregon. I think right. What many people admire about you, and I know Solomon Partners admire this, which is why they've got you as one of their speakers at the Media and Entertainment Summit, which takes place Tuesday, January the 24th, which is what we're going to talk about in a second, is that you've always got many strings to your bow. So whilst we're talking here about you building a brand new OLED display manufacturing plant in Oregon, you've been continuing the work with Stratacache, continuing the work with Scala, and you've been making good headway with retail media networks, which again, and I know one of the topics that Mark Boydman will talk about is how strong retail media networks are at the moment. And I don't know when, you'll know because you've probably got an eidetic memory, but when you acquired PRN all those years ago, I remember writing long paragraphs about PRN and Thompson and all the bits and pieces, but it seemed to land in the right hands. Your PRN is doing rather well at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So you have the continuing trend in retail, which is retailers need to find new ways to monetize the customer to be able to compete with Mr. Bezos and Amazon. So retail media networks, and specifically the place-based in-store dropping displays in that retail location, making them work. We have tremendous experience there. Arguably, PRN created that entire business model when they were founded in the late 1990s and proved it out with Walmart, as we've proved it out with Walmart as well. So that retail media network, globally, that's a $121 billion a year opportunity. For the physical store, that's a $5, $7, $10 billion a year opportunity in the next 2 years. So there's tremendous opportunity there, and that's kind of played in very well in our strategy, both with PRN because they're expert at that,
Absolutely.
and then some of the products that we're building in Eugene on micro LED play directly into that. How do I make those very unique products that can work within a retail environment? Because taking a standard 16 by 9 55-inch screen and slamming that into a grocery store may or may not work in many cases. But if I'm building specialty display, I can integrate that proximate to the consumer and give them a better experience.
Again, you're back in Oregon now, I think, but you were in New York last week at NRF. You were one of the very first, I call you a digital signage player. I know you're much more than that, but certainly you were one of the very first players in digital signage to do anything at NRF. You've worked your way up over 6 or 7 years now to be on the top floor, up there with the big boys next to the Googles and the Microsofts. How was NRF for you last week?
Yeah, so actually, as a point of correction, this was our 25th NRF.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
25 years. It's a lot
Wow.
of pain to get there. That being said, within our strategy of saying I'm tying visual displays from the digital signage divisions to our walk-based, our sensor technology, and then to some of our artificial intelligence technology, retailers are now getting it, that they understand that a display without intelligence, without knowledge of that customer is less impactful. So the kind of strategy that we set out 10 years ago and have done acquisitions as well as native development to get to is now really starting to pay off in spades.
Right. Again, people forget that you acquired Walkbase, you've done your own camera systems as well. And Scala. So Scala and X2O will be an ISE next
Correct.
week in Barcelona.
Yeah, so both Scala.
What will they be displaying?
Yeah, so Scala is going through a whole series of really cool technology debuts at ISE on customer service and self-service use points. So we're working on the trend that says in a retail environment anywhere around the world, good help is hard to find. It's increasingly expensive. So how do I do things like our assisted selling kiosk to make a customer's journey? Hey, I want to buy a complex product. I want to learn more about that. How do I do that? So it's extending the old lift and learn technology that Scala was an early pioneer in to then remote support and remote experts around it, more shelf-enabled compute and shelf-enabled display. So how do I help that customer through the journey is very strong with Scala. On the X2O side, we're seeing great opportunities now as Barco seems to be leaving that connected advanced compute experience and learning management environment, where at the X2O side with very large customers around the world, we're seeing increased interest in using these true virtual meeting spaces, the level and the tier above a Zoom or above a WebEx, to be able to go deep in enhanced training, enhanced communications, and save people time and money.
Yeah, I can't remember which event it was. They all blur into each other, and it may have been just before COVID, but I remember that you had two separate booths. One was for X2O in a hall, which was dedicated more towards that meeting room, corporate type stuff, and then Scala was on another booth. So yeah, I like what you've done with X2O. That was, again, another good acquisition that we tend to forget about. We forget how many acquisitions you've done in the last 10 years.
Absolutely. X2O was really a diamond in the rough, and with the in COVID and now post-COVID, the endpoints of greater efficiency, people wanting to travel less and be able to have more meaningful meetings and sessions, X2O has really found its running stride, and we're now doing literally hundreds of X2O one rooms per year.
Right. So that was funny because you bought that from Barco, so that was one that definitely got away.
Correct.
Then anyway, so tomorrow, Tuesday, January 24th, you'll be presenting in the morning. Is the big takeaway going to be retail media networks? What are you going to leave with Mark Boydman's audience with?
Absolutely.
Anything? Well, it's always going to be exciting and interesting from you, but anything controversial?
I don't think anything controversial. Just the opportunity that's in front of retailers today for the next 1, 3, 5 years on building out these retail media networks is going to be, for some of them, the difference between life and death. The ability to drive new revenue streams in that store is absolutely essential as margins continue to get squeezed by inflation and other challenges. So retail media networks aligning perfectly in the scale to it. I think very few outside of industry understand the size and scale of these opportunities, that you're talking about multi-billion-dollar marketplaces that are just emerging very rapidly today.
Just my last question, I think, because I only just thought of this, but the work you've been doing with drive-through checkout, so automated kiosk stuff, you've done a lot of AI stuff in that space as well. That's different to retail media networks.
Not necessarily, in that retailers have great first-party data if you have their loyalty cards, you have their loyalty information. So you may shop at a Tesco or an Asda, and if they have loyalty, at the end of your journey, they know exactly what you bought because they're able to associate that back. What they don't know is what you didn't buy. What aisles did you go down and traverse? What aisles did you shop but you did not convert on? And did you not convert on them because there was nobody there to assist you, because you had questions, because all of your selection was other? So we're building this 360 view of the consumer, number one. Number two, there's a new revenue opportunity for these retailers as well, which is when I'm going through this store, maybe you spent a lot of time in organic food, but you didn't buy anything in that grocery. If you're an organic food buyer, the knowledge that you're interested in organic foods can be resold to Peloton as a company to retarget you because you have more health conscious nature than others. So there's ways that retailers can monetize that shopper journey in completely different ways, especially now that you see things like Netflix having advertising, and that OTT or that cable television streaming advertising ability to target someone based on their ad ID and their consumer profile is super interesting.
Brilliant. Okay, that's really, really interesting indeed. Okay, thank you, Chris. Have a good presentation tomorrow. I know that you're amongst some very senior CEOs, but I know you'll stand out as one of the best presentations of the day. I know that from when you've presented for us in the past. So good luck tomorrow.
Thank you.
And hope to see you very soon.
Always a pleasure.